All right, let's talk about a really radical shift in power that's happening right under our noses. I mean, what happens when a company stops just selling you things and starts acting like your government? Think about it. Corporate-built cities, their own private laws, a future where the CEO of your company could literally be your head of state. And no, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. This is happening right now.
So just imagine for a second, what if your company wasn't just the place you clocked in every day, but it was the actual government you lived under? It's a pretty wild question, right? But it's forcing us to totally rethink what a nation even is. Because that line between a corporate boardroom and a government building, well, it's starting to get really, really blurry.
So why is all this happening now? Well, as always, you just gotta follow the money. Get this. A single giant tech company can have a market cap that's bigger than the entire GDP of a country like New Zealand. I mean, think about that for a second. When a corporation has that kind of financial muscle, one that rivals a whole nation, it's almost natural that they'd start wanting a nation's other powers too. Powers like, writing their own laws and building their own cities without anyone else getting in their way. But here's the kicker. This whole idea of a corporate state, it's not some new 21st century thing. Not at all. The original blueprint for this was actually drawn up almost 400 years ago. And believe me, it set one heck of a precedent.
So, let me introduce you to the VOC. That's the Dutch East India Company. This thing, it wasn't just the world's first multinational corporation. You could argue it was the world's first corporate sovereign. It was a business, sure, but it had all the power of a government, thanks to a charter from the Dutch state that basically told it to go out and dominate global trade.
And boy, did it dominate. The company's rise was just explosive. I mean, only 17 years after it was founded, it set up its own capital city in Asia. For more than a century, this thing operated like a global empire. It was a commercial beast, totally unlike anything the world had ever seen. Eventually, its charter ran out, and the Dutch government took over its lands, but the model was set. You have to understand the kind of powers the Dutch government gave the VOC. We're talking about powers you only associate with actual countries. It could wage war with its own private army. It could negotiate treaties with kings and queens. It could print its own money and build its own colonies. It wasn't just like a country. For all intents and purposes, it was one. And check out this quote from one of the VOC's leaders. It really says it all, doesn't it? "We cannot carry on trade without war, nor war without trade." For them, business and battle were two sides of the same coin. There was no line in the sand between making a profit and wielding the power of a state. They were the exact same thing.
Okay, so let's fast forward 400 years to today. That same basic idea, it's making a comeback. But this time, it's not some massive trading company with a fleet of warships. It's something way more subtle, and maybe, just maybe, even more revolutionary. We're talking about the charter city. So, what in the world is a charter city? The easiest way to think about it is like a startup city, okay? A host country basically carves out a piece of land and gives it a special charter. This charter lets the city create its own laws and its own government, totally from scratch. The whole point is to build this hyper-efficient little bubble for innovation and investment, completely free from all the old clunky regulations. Now, you've probably heard of special economic zones, right? SEZs? Well, think of charter cities as SEZs on steroids. I mean, a typical SEZ might offer some tax breaks to get a few factories to move into an industrial park. But a charter city? Oh, it's a whole different ballgame. It's about rewriting the entire rulebook, from business law to how the streets are laid out, for a massive, brand new city. We're not just building an industrial park here. The goal is to build an entirely new kind of society. And if you want to see just how powerful this idea can be, you have to look at Shenzhen, China. Back in 1980, before it became one of China's first special economic zones, Shenzhen was just, it was a handful of fishing villages. The population was about 100,000 people. It was a tiny, tiny dot on the map. And today, it's a sprawling, gleaming metropolis of 20 million people. It's a global powerhouse for tech and finance. That, right there, is the power of changing the rules. You don't just get a little investment, you can literally create a brand new center of gravity for the entire world economy. This whole trend really comes to life with the return of the old company town. And there is no better, more modern example than what's happening down in Texas, a place called Starbase, where one guy isn't just building rockets to go to space, he's building an entire city around them. Yeah, way down in a remote corner of South Texas, SpaceX isn't just building a launch pad to Mars, it's building a city right here on Earth. This is the ultimate comeback story for the company town, a community where pretty much every single part of your life is shaped by one corporate vision. And look, this isn't just some cutesy nickname they've given the place. They are actually following the legal steps to become a real official city. The residents, and yeah, most of them are SpaceX employees, they can actually vote to incorporate and elect their own government. And this is where it gets really interesting, because you're watching a corporate campus slowly and deliberately turn itself into a legal city with all the official powers that go along with it.
And once it's incorporated, Starbase would get some pretty astonishing powers. Government powers. We're talking about creating its own police department, establishing its own local court, setting its own taxes and local laws. It could even use eminent domain. That's the power the government has to take your private property for a so-called public purpose. You see how the lines just completely blur until the company and the government basically become the same thing?
Of course, this kind of power all in one place raises some pretty serious questions. I mean, the UN has principles saying all businesses have to respect human rights, but what happens when there are no checks and balances? What happens when your boss is also your landlord, the person who writes the laws, and the chief of police? It's a situation that really challenges our whole idea of what accountability is supposed to look like.
So, okay, if a company can build a whole city in the physical world, what's the next logical step, especially in our super digital age? Well, the answer might be, you don't start with land at all. You start with an idea, online. And this brings us to the really radical concept of the network state.
This idea has been pushed by thinkers like Balaji Srinivasan. And here's the gist. A network state is a nation that's born on the internet first. You get a global community of people online, all united by some shared goal. They then crowdfund enough money to buy up physical land and property all over the world. And the ultimate endgame? To get other countries to officially recognize them as a brand new sovereign nation.
The roadmap for creating one is pretty wild. Step 1. You start with an idea online that gets a bunch of people really excited. Step 2. That community gets organized and pools its money to start buying up actual property. You know, apartments, houses, land, all scattered around the globe. And then the final, most ambitious step of all, you go to the UN and everyone else and ask to be recognized as a real country.
So you might be asking, what's the point? What would these new countries even be for? Well, the people who believe in this stuff imagine these super specialized societies. For example, you could have a health-focused state where every bit of food has to meet super strict dietary rules. Or how about a biomedical sanctuary that cuts through all the red tape to speed up medical research? You could even have a tech hub that lets you do crazy experiments with things like drone deliveries. Each one would be a whole society built around one big idea.
So when you look at the whole picture, from that 400-year-old Dutch company to Starbase in Texas to this idea of network states, you start to see a really clear pattern emerging. Those old solid lines between what's a company, what's a city, and what's a country, they're all blurring together into something totally new and honestly, pretty revolutionary.
You know, this whole shift really changes how we even think about building a society. For hundreds of years, we've kind of debated two main ways to build a city. There's the top-down, planned-out to the last inch model, like St. Petersburg. And then there's the more chaotic, market-driven, let-it-grow-on-its-own model, like New York City. Well, this whole corporate sovereign idea is like a return to that top-down planning. But there's one huge difference. This time, the master plan isn't being written by a czar or a king, it's being written by a CEO. And it's being optimized for profit, not just for pure power.
And all of this leaves us with one last massive question to think about. As these companies and online groups start to act more and more like nations, what does it even mean to be a citizen? In the future, is your identity going to be defined by your passport or by the company platform you belong to? Will you be American or will you be a citizen of Starbase? That's not a hypothetical anymore. That's the future that we are building right now.
Wow, that was something, right? But don't go anywhere, there's more coming, and it's gonna make you think in a whole new way. Quick reminder, if you like learning cool stuff without the fluff, subscribe now. You won't regret it.
For the last 50 years or so, we've all lived in a world where one currency has basically run the show. It's dominated global trade, finance, and really power itself. But right now, a quiet, almost invisible technological revolution is happening. New bridges are being built for money, and they could completely rewire the world as we know. And no, this isn't some far-off sci-fi movie plot. It's happening right now. In this explainer, we are going to pull back the curtain on a new technology called mBridge. It's a project that is posing a direct challenge to the very foundation of the global financial system. Okay, so before we can really look into the future, we have to get a solid grasp on how the world's money moves today. Because right now, it's a system built almost entirely around the US dollar, and that gives America a really unique and incredibly powerful position on the world stage.
There's this wild concept for it. It's called exorbitant privilege. Think about it like this. Because the whole world needs dollars for pretty much everything, from buying oil to settling international contracts, there's this constant, massive global demand for US assets. And that lets the US borrow money way more cheaply than anyone else, giving it enormous economic influence.
And here, this is how that power actually works in practice. This image shows the plumbing of the global financial system. So let's say a company over in Thailand wants to pay a supplier in China using US dollars. You'd think the money would just go straight from Thailand to China, right? Nope. It actually takes a detour. It gets routed through what are called correspondent banks right here in the United States. This simple routing detail literally places the US at the very center of global finance.
But this system, as dominant as it's been for decades, well, it's starting to show some pretty serious strains. And for regular people and businesses, the problems are practical. But for entire nations, they're becoming geopolitical. The Financial Stability Board actually calls these the 4 pains of cross-border payments. And if you've ever had to send money internationally, oh man, you know this feeling all too well. It's painfully slow, it's weirdly expensive, sometimes you just can't get access, and it's often a total black box. You have no idea where your money is or how many fees are getting tacked on along the way.
But you know what? The biggest crack forming in this whole system, it's not really about the cost or the speed. Because the US sits smack in the middle of this payment network, it has a unique and incredibly powerful financial weapon: sanctions. And here is where it gets really, really interesting. Through something called secondary sanctions, the US can essentially tell a bank in, say, Germany or Japan who it can and cannot do business with, and forces them into a choice: either do business with us or do business with the country we've sanctioned, but you can't do both. This effectively gives the United States a veto over the trade of other sovereign nations. And as you can imagine, that has created a massive incentive for a lot of countries to find a way around the dollar system.
And that way around, well, it now has a name. It's a multinational project that isn't just trying to patch up the old system. Oh no. It's building a completely new set of financial highways from the ground up. So let me introduce you to Project mBridge. It's backed by the central banks of China, Hong Kong, Thailand, the UAE, and just recently, Saudi Arabia jumped on board. It is a platform specifically built to bypass that old correspondent banking system entirely. It's a direct bridge for money between countries. And when you put the two side by side, wow, the difference is just stark. It's night and day. The old way is like this long, winding, expensive road with a bunch of toll booths. The mBridge way is a direct, transparent superhighway. Transactions settle peer-to-peer, not in days, but in seconds, using their own local currencies. So what's the engine driving this thing? It's a technology called Wholesale Central Bank Digital Currencies, or CBDCs. Now hold on, this isn't digital money for you and I to go buy coffee with. This is different. Think of it more like a special kind of digital cash that's used exclusively by the big banks to settle huge transactions with each other almost instantly. And get this, the results from its pilot program were absolutely stunning. The project showed that it could slash the costs of these massive cross-border transactions by up to 50%, and at the same time, it cut the settlement times from multiple days down to just a few seconds. But listen, make no mistake about it. This is about so much more than just faster, cheaper payments. For the countries involved in this, it represents a dream they've held for a long, long time: to rewire the global balance of power. I mean, just look at this trend line. You've got the nations in the BRICS Plus bloc, which now includes huge energy producers like Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and for the last 2 decades, their share of the global economy and trade has been steadily climbing. They already have the economic weight, and now they're building the financial tools to match it.
And let's zero in on a critical sector, like energy. BRICS Plus nations now account for 37% of the fuel trade among all emerging markets. That gives them enormous leverage to start saying, hey, from now on, we want this trade to be settled in our own currencies, on a platform like mBridge instead of the dollar.
So the motivation here is crystal clear. For these countries, a system like mBridge isn't just some technical upgrade. No, it's a strategic move. It's about insulating themselves from US sanctions, gaining control over their own money, and building a new, non-Western economic bloc. Okay, but this is not a done deal, not by a long shot. The tracks for this new system are definitely being laid, but the real battle for the future of money, well, it's actually just beginning.
See, mBridge faces these enormous challenges. I mean, who makes the rules? How do you create a deep, liquid market for dozens of different currencies all at once? And it may be the biggest question of all. How do you possibly compete with the US dollar, which is so deeply woven into every single corner of the global economy? It is a monumental task.
And you can bet the West is not just sitting on its hands watching this all unfold. There's a countermove. A competing project called Agora has been launched by some of the heaviest hitters, the US Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, and others. It aims to use similar technology, but for a very, very different purpose.
The whole philosophy behind Agora is fundamentally different. It's not about bypassing the dollar, it's about making the existing dollar-centric system faster and more efficient. And why would they do that? Well, to get rid of the very pain points that are pushing countries to look for alternatives in the first place. Their goal is to renovate the house, not build a whole new one next door.
So what's the likely outcome of all this? A world that could become financially fractured. We might be heading towards something people are calling a splinternet of money, where two parallel, competing systems exist side by side. For you and me, that could mean the cost and the complexity of sending money or buying something from overseas might depend entirely on which financial internet that country uses. It's a future with new walls, not bridges.
And that leaves us with this profound final question. For decades, a single financial system, for all of its flaws, did connect the entire globe. Is this shift we're seeing the beginning of a more balanced, multipolar financial world? Or will these competing systems actually create deeper, more dangerous economic divisions? The answer to that question is going to define the 21st century.
Wow, that was something, right? But don't go anywhere, there's more coming, and it's going to make you think in a whole new way. Quick reminder, if you like learning cool stuff without the fluff, subscribe now. You won't regret it.
Okay, let's dive right into one of the biggest, strangest paradoxes happening in our economy today. Have you felt this? You open up your investment app, you look at your 401k, and you see the stock market hitting all-time highs. It feels like things should be great, right? But then, you switch tabs, you read the news, and it's all about how AI is getting smarter and might be coming for your job. So, your portfolio is exploding, but your job security feels like it's dying. How can both of these things be true at the exact same time? Well, that's what we're going to break down today. Let's get into it.
You know, for the longest time, we've been taught that if the stock market is booming, then the economy must be healthy, and that's good for everybody. But this quote right here, it just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly captures that confusion and that disconnect we're all feeling. The market and the real economy, the one where we work and earn a living, they're not the same. And it feels like that gap between Wall Street's success and Main Street's anxiety is getting wider and wider, with AI acting as this massive, powerful wedge driving them apart.
And this really lays it all out, side by side. On the left, you've got your portfolio. Capital is doing incredibly well. Investments are thriving in a market that just keeps climbing. But then you look at the right side, and that's where the anxiety about your job comes in. That's the reality for labor. There's this very real, very credible fear that generative AI could automate, get this, 300 million jobs. It honestly feels like we're living in two totally different economic worlds at once. Okay, so to really understand what's happening, we've got to follow the money. And that means we have to start with the capital side of this whole equation. It all kicks off with what everyone is calling the new AI gold rush. But instead of people rushing out with pickaxes to dig for gold, this time the rush is to pour unbelievable amounts of money into artificial intelligence. And the scale of this investment, it's just staggering.
Now, don't let the letters on the screen scare you off. This is actually a super simple but incredibly powerful idea from the economist Thomas Piketty. It's called R is greater than G. Think of it this way. R is the rate of return on capital. It's the money your money makes from investments. G is the rate of economic growth, how fast the whole economic pie is getting bigger for everyone. Piketty's point is that when R is bigger than G, it means the slice of the pie for people who already own capital is growing way, way faster than the pie itself. And that, my friends, is the recipe for wealth to concentrate at the very top. Right now, the AI revolution is basically putting that dynamic on hyperdrive.
You know the old saying from the gold rush days, right? The surest way to get rich wasn't digging for gold yourself, but selling the picks and shovels to all the hopeful miners. Well, welcome to the 21st century version of that.
Today's picks and shovels are all digital. The real mind-blowing money isn't just in creating the next ChatGPT, it's flowing into the foundational infrastructure that makes all AI possible. We're talking about those super powerful graphics processing units, or GPUs, the massive data centers, and the whole cloud computing backbone of the revolution. And if you want to understand the scale we're talking about, just look at this number. NVIDIA, the company that makes most of the essential chips for AI, is reportedly spending over $26 billion on cloud computing. Now think about that for a second. This creates this wild feedback loop. They sell the hardware that powers AI, and then they turn around and become a massive customer for the very cloud services that run on, you guessed it, their hardware. It's like pouring rocket fuel on an already roaring fire. This quote just perfectly captures the insane, high-stakes poker game that is the AI gold rush. The technology is moving at a dizzying pace. A computer chip that's basically priceless today, the key to everything, could literally be obsolete by the next quarter. This extreme volatility, this environment of super high risk, but also super high reward, that is precisely what is juicing the returns for the investors, for the capital owners who place the right bets. So that's the capital boom. That explains why your portfolio might be looking so good. But now we have to flip the coin and look at the other side of this paradox. And this is where it starts to get really personal for you, for me, for all of us. Because while capital is having the time of its life, labor, well, we're facing a completely different reality. And the craziest part is, without even realizing it, our daily work has become the classroom for the very AI that might one day replace us. So it begs the question, right? How in the world did these AI models get so good at doing complicated human jobs? I mean, they can write professional emails, they can code software, they can even handle customer service calls with real empathy and nuance. They're clearly not just following some simple little script, they're learning, they're adapting. So who's teaching them? And the answer is as simple as it is, well, kind of startling. The AI is learning by watching us. In so many modern workplaces, some form of surveillance is now just a routine part of the job. These AI models are being trained on our recorded customer service calls, our screen activity, our emails, our internal chats. Every single day, our human expertise, our problem-solving skills are being systematically recorded and converted into training data. And please, don't make the mistake of thinking this is just some niche thing happening in a few tech companies in Silicon Valley. Nope. A recent study found that a staggering 78% of workers in the United States are subject to some kind of electronic monitoring on the job. Let that sink in. That means the data generated from the daily work of nearly 8 out of 10 people is becoming the single most valuable resource for training the next generation of AI. This changes everything about the nature of a job. You're no longer just getting paid for the value you produce today. Whether you know it or not, you are also building a brand new form of capital for your employer. A fully trained AI model that contains your expertise, your experience, your skills. It's a model that can then replicate what you do, but infinitely, at a massive scale, and without ever needing a coffee break.
All right, so let's put the two pieces of the puzzle together. On one side, you've got this massive AI gold rush, which is an incredible boom for capital. On the other side, you have the AI classroom, which is built on the data from human labor. When you combine these two massive trends, what you get is a powerful, brand new engine for economic inequality.
This slide really breaks down the cycle that's fueling this new inequality. Step 1. A flood of capital gets invested into AI infrastructure. Step 2. That AI then learns from and starts to automate human labor. Step 3. The huge productivity gains and profits that come from that automation, well, they don't really go to the workers whose data trained the models. They flow directly to the owners of the capital, the owners of the AI. And the result, step 4, the wealth gap doesn't just grow, it accelerates like never before.
This is what we can call the intelligence Gini. It's a new twist on the old Gini coefficient, which is a tool economists use to measure wealth inequality. But this is something new. This isn't just about who has more money. It's a new economic divide between those who own the artificial intelligence itself and those whose human labor is essentially just the raw material being used to make that intelligence smarter.
And that leaves us with the fundamental question of our time. It's the big one. We are witnessing the birth of incredible new technology, unbelievable new value, and capabilities we could only dream of a decade ago. But the real conflict here isn't about whether the tech is good or bad. It's about ownership. As AI builds our collective future, the single most important question we need to ask is, who gets to own the blueprints? I'd love to know what you think. What's your take on all this? Drop a comment below and let's discuss it. And if you got some value out of this breakdown, a like and subscribe would be amazing. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time on The Violet Vault.
Thank you for spending time with us here at the Violet Vault.
Don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay focused and keep growing.